Warning: viewer discretion is advised. Hi friends, welcome to Meals Done Alive For, where we talk about a true crime case and make a death row meal from scratch. I'm your host, Jody Breton, and if you enjoy this episode, please like and subscribe. I'm on TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, all the things, so please come find me. Today we're talking about a man named Alan Lee Davis. Now, I don't have a lot of information about his earlier childhood, but he does have some prior convictions, and hopefully we can get into the case itself. Alan Lee Davis was born July 20th, 1944, in Millinocket, Maine, into a poor, uneducated family. According to Davis's brother, his uncle reportedly molested him as a child and later went to prison for molesting another child. Davis himself said that he had been repeatedly molested by relatives of his stepfather. So again, we don't know much, but it seems like he suffered a lot of abuse that we know of. He definitely had some prior convictions, one of which, while he was at a hospital in Maryland in the 1960s, Davis admitted to molesting a number of young children. As a juvenile, he was charged with fondling an 11-year-old girl and sent to the State Reformatory for Men in Maine. Now, I couldn't figure out when he got in and when he got out. It's very possible that he was still underage at this point, so that's probably why I can't find that information. Davis also caught a manslaughter charge stemming from a car accident that occurred on April 21st, 1965. He was put in a hospital for a month with serious injuries. Two of his friends who were in the car with him died in the accident. After Davis said that he had taken a shot for weight control and had drunk several beers prior to the accident, he was charged with involuntary manslaughter. The case was heard in federal court since the accident occurred on federal property. Davis was found guilty and sentenced to 3 years in prison. He served his sentence at the Federal Correction Institute in Petersburg, Virginia. He began his sentence on January 13th, 1967, and was paroled on November 12th, 1968. Personally, I think that is entirely not enough time due to the fact that he was driving under the influence and two of his friends passed away due to his negligence. I just don't think that that's okay. Then 5 years later, in 1973, Davis was arrested for armed robbery, attempted robbery, and use of a firearm. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison and was released after serving 8 years of his sentence. So if you're doing the math, Davis would be paroled in 1981, and the very next year, in 1982, he would go on to commit his most heinous crime. At this point, Alan Davis was living in Jacksonville, Florida, with his parents, who were the neighbors of the Weilers. The Weilers consisted of John and Nancy Weiler and their two daughters, Kathy and Christy, who were 10 and 5 at the time. The family was in the process of moving, so John Weiler was actually already in Pennsylvania at the time, getting ready to start his new job, and Nancy had stayed behind to finish up the house and get everything moved so that way they could start their new life in Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, it was not meant to be. On May 11th, 1982, Davis broke into the home and started attacking Nancy Weiler, who was also 3 months pregnant at the time with the family's third child. He bludgeoned Nancy so badly that she was barely recognizable when the police found her body. He hit her over 25 times with a .357, and due to the force that he used, he actually broke the handle of the gun that he was hitting her with. Davis then tied up 9-year-old Christy, a 5th grade student who hoped to become a nuclear engineer someday, and shot her in the face. The very next day would have been her 10th birthday. 5-year-old Kathy tried to run away from the scene, but Davis shot her in the back and then crushed in her skull with the gun. Police were immediately suspicious of Alan Lee Davis. I mean, he had just gotten out of prison and was on parole, so I mean, that would be the first person on my list as well, and he was living right next door. 3 different individuals reported seeing a man near the Weiler home at approximately 8 p.m. on the day of the murders. One of them believed he was carrying a firearm, and the sighting aligned with the approximate time of the crime. The day after the murders occurred, David's father, Donald, owned a .357 Ruger Blackhawk revolver, which went missing the day after the murders. He provided investigators with a box of ammunition whose bullets matched the fragments found in the home. Exactly 5 rounds had been fired at the crime scene. Police also found rope in David's truck that was consistent with the cord used to tie Christina's hands. Since Davis also burglarized the home of jewelry and a Nikon camera, they also found some of the Weiler's possessions in his possession, later found during a search. Davis also failed a polygraph test given by investigators. Davis also made troubling statements to others, including a friend, Richard Padon, indicating plans to burglarize a house in his father's upscale neighborhood, and as later reported, an admission that he intended to molest and unalive Christina, and that Nancy and Catherine were a secondary goal before robbing the house. I really wish that the friend had come forward and told investigators. It could have saved these poor people, and they might still be here today. Guys, if someone jokes to you about unaliving someone, please take it seriously and go to the proper authorities, because you never know if they're serious or not. I've heard so many times in so many cases where they actually tell someone either about a planned murder or one that has already happened, and they always say, "Oh, I didn't think that they were serious." Well, a lot of people are, so please take it seriously. Alan Lee Davis was the last prisoner executed by electric chair, and they say that his execution was botched, but let me walk you through what happened step by step. Alan Lee Davis's execution was July 8th, 1999. He was already in poor health, so he was wheeled into the death chamber in a wheelchair, his enormous shaved head glistening with gel. He returned the stares of witnesses but showed no emotion. Silently, 4 guards lifted him into a chair and fastened him into the seat, buckling the thick leather straps across his chest, waist, and arms. When the prison warden, James Crosby, asked if he had any last words, Davis shook his head. The chin strap was placed over his mouth, a wide leather band that covered the lower half of his face. His cheeks and forehead reddened, then the headpiece with its lethal brass electrode was lowered onto his head, and a black mask dropped over his eyes. As the official nodded towards the black-hooded executioner, who was paid $150 in cash for the task, Davis's chest began to rise, and he let out 2 muffled screams. Behind a blue curtain, the executioner threw the switch. Davis's massive body jerked back against the oak chair, his fists clenched. The only sound was the low hum of electricity as the chair delivered its deathly charge and 3 pulsing signals. Then a trickle of bright red blood appeared at the front of his white shirt near the center of his chest. Prison officials in the death chamber looked at each other, then eyes widening as the blood started to enlarge. None of them moved. The blood continued to seep, dripping onto the leather restraints and leaking through the holes for the buckle. The executioner flipped a switch at 7:05, and power was shut off at 7:07. Correction officer officials said, after the power was shut off, Davis's chest convulsed and he shuddered at least twice, while prison medical officials took his pulse. A second medical worker unbuttoned Davis's bloodied shirt and, using a stethoscope, declared him dead at 7:15. By then, the bleeding had stopped. So Davis had been on a few blood thinners due to his arthritis, which could have been the partial cause of the nosebleed that happened. He wasn't bleeding from anywhere else. He also had an autopsy done after, and it was just a nosebleed. He wasn't bleeding or injured from anywhere else on his body that made him bleed, at least. Officials think that he started to asphyxiate because his airflow was blocked by the mousetrap, the face mask, and his own blood. So when he started to make sounds underneath the face mask and screams, we think that it was him trying to get the guards' attention that he couldn't breathe. During the autopsy, he also had burns on certain parts of his body, like his head, I believe his chest, and his calf. But if you know anything about the electric chair, this is normal. Everyone who is electrocuted that way does have burns after the fact. So, this whole thing caused a lot of controversy. That's why Alan Lee Davis is so well known. He was the last inmate executed via electric chair in Florida to date. They can still select the electric chair if they would like to, but more often than not, they select lethal injection. So that's why he's so well known. They did take pictures of him after he was executed. If that's something that you want to see or you're curious about, it is all over the internet. Personally, I don't know why we're talking about this. He had no care or concern for Nancy Weiler or her two daughters, so I'm not sure why we should have any concern for him. He did the crime and he was executed, and I think that that's just the basis of it. It's, I guess, unfortunate that he got a nosebleed and it caused so much controversy, but I think that that's where the concern for me ends. John Weiler did attend the execution, and this is what he had to say. All Florida residents understand the importance of this. This was a necessary thing that had to be done, and everyone has to understand why. I've had to wait 17 years for some type of closure to this. No one should have to do that. Any more than 1 year to carry out a sentence is ridiculous. I can honestly understand why he was so upset, and I don't blame him one bit. Honestly, I really hope that he's doing okay. I did not look into him because I want to respect the family's privacy, but I can't imagine losing my entire family in one day. As for Alan Lee Davis's last meal, he had one that consisted of a lobster tail, fried potatoes, a half pound of fried shrimp, 6 ounces of fried clam, a loaf of garlic bread, and an A&W root beer. Personally, I would give this meal a 7 out of 10. I don't think that it was extraordinary, but it wasn't a bad one, so we'll go with that. I had actually never made fried clams from scratch before, so that was a new experience for me, pain in the butt, and personally, I think that the insides look like boogers, so that was not a fan for me, but all in all, I think that it was okay. Well, thanks for hanging out with me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please like, subscribe, share, do all the things so I can continue to put out more content. Thanks so much, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.